Hi, Dad. Hello, good morning.
How's it going?
Hi, great, great. Hi, hi from Bangkok.
Nice to meet you. I don't see anything on video. Is that intentional?
Yeah, I think that's intentional. Since the video right now it's only broadcast to uh the Microsoft team or the internal or necessarily the X team only. But however, over here we have more than 20 participants waiting to talk with you. There.
Great, cool.
Cool. So so this morning, this workshop, what it's gonna be about?
Yeah, so this is going to be a talk on kind of some efficient architectures for machine learning. Uh,
All right. So can we jump in with questions anytime?
sure, yeah. Go ahead with questions at any time. I think I have until, I guess it's my time set at 5. We're not quite sure what time it is there. But yeah, happy to take questions during the talk.
All right. So please give it away, Dad.
Cool. Should I go ahead and share my screen and get started?
Yeah. You are being broadcast right now. Yeah.
All right, cool. Okay, cool. Yeah, so can everybody see those slides?
Yes.
Great.
Cool.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so thanks so much for having me today. My name is Dan. Today I'm going to be talking about some new ideas we have in developing kind of fundamentally more efficient architectures that are sub-quadratic sequencing and model dimension. So before we dive in, let's take a look at kind of like why we want to do this work, like what has been happening in machine learning over the past 3 years to kind of motivate this. So over the past few years, we've seen some pretty crazy scaling of machine learning models. So one big one that you've noticed over the past 4 years is there's been this crazy scaling in model size. Models have grown from 100 billion parameters to 500 billion parameters in just a few years. And so that's brought with it some. Right, my slides are sucking. 1 second. All right, yeah. So that's brought with it along some basic capabilities. Human-like chat models, the ability to help you write code, analyze complex text, all the things that we're seeing with AI models these days. But we're also seeing another trend. So we're seeing models are also scaling a lot of context length. So over the past 2 or so years, they've gone from only being able to take in around 500 tokens at a time to now GPT-4 can take 100,000 tokens. And so that's brought along with it some new capabilities, like now you can upload an entire PDF to GPT-4, have it analyze it. You can start to maybe it'll be able to learn from entire books or entire training manuals. In computer vision, long context means high resolution imaging, which is particularly important for medical applications where you might need the high resolution to find abnormalities. So we started scaling along these two axes, but it's actually been extremely expensive. And that's because our current models are quadratic on these two axes that we're scaling. So attention is quadratic in the sequence like N, and the NLPs are quadratic in the model dimension D. So that's actually where when we say that we have a trillion parameter model, that's because we're taking these NLPs, this model with it, we're scaling it so wide in the model dimension. So just as a reminder, quadratic scaling is actually really expensive. So these are just, some graphs that I graphs online. That blue line is quadratic scaling. And one thing that we started asking is, can we get better scaling properties? Can we get something that's maybe n log n that's in this orange line, or even x to 3 halves would get us better scaling properties. Okay, so given kind of this, really expensive quadratic scaling, one thing that you could say, and kind of what you would say if you're OpenAI or if you're, let's call it a scaling maximalist, is just say, okay, let's just keep going. Let's say that we need more flop. You're just going to need more compute, more time, or resources to train the next generation models. So of course, that's going to be extremely expensive. Well, we're also starting to see kind of the upper limits of that. So whether it's by just the sheer cost, will continue to scale these models, or by, Joe Biden executive order, there's a limit really to how much we can continue to scale these models. So really the question I want to put forth today, and that we're going to explore a little bit, is there a better way forward? Can we do something else besides just scale these models up? In particular, can we find performant architectures that can scale sub-quadratically sequence like the model mentioned? Because if we can, that could really change the calculus of what models we want to be training. So I'm going to be talking about kind of two papers today along both these axes, so scaling sub-quadratically sequencing and also sub-quadratically in the model dimension. So the first is this paper called H3 Hungry Hippos, and this one is really a combination of a new architecture and some hybrid attention layers that allows us to start scaling sub-quadratically. So it's a new layer based on state space models, which scale linearly in the context length. They actually don't have a fixed context window. So these H3 models, you train them on one sequence length, you can start, running them on any sequence length. We showed that you can replace almost all the attention layers in a transformer. And when you do so, we had this hybrid architecture. You can actually outperform them in perplexity and downstream evaluation. So you actually get a better, higher quality model at the end of it. The second paper that I was talking about is called Monarch Mixer. So our Monarch Mixer, we take it one step further. We scale sub-quadratically, not only in sequence length, but also in that model dimension. So Monarch Mixer, it's a new sub-quadratic hardware efficient architecture that scales sub-quadratically on like these two axes. We show that you can match transformer quality in things like BERT, VIT, GPT with up to 50% fewer parameters, fewer flops, and faster wall log time. And we also have some early results where we're starting to use these models for long sequence retrieval. So if you have, for example, a whole document that you want to bring into your retrieval as a generation model, Monarch Mixer might be a way to start doing that. Okay, so first let's start with H3 Hungry Hippos. Thanks for bringing out that news. It's really great to see everybody there. Okay, so the motivation behind H3 is that the attention layer in the core of transformers is quadratic in sequence length. So going from a sequence length 32K to 64K, that's not twice as expensive. It's actually 4 times as expensive. So in H3, we started to take a first step and say, can we replace this attention block with something that's sub-quadratic? How far can we go? So in the H3 portion of this talk, we'll kind of split into 3 parts. So first, I'll go over some background on the technologies that we're going to use to break the quadratic barrier. Then I'll talk about the H3 architecture itself, and then I'll tell you about some H3 models that we trained to validate our ideas. So let's start with some background. I'll start with kind of a primer on generative language models. So I'm sure most of the people in the audience know this now, but just so that we're all on the same page. So generative language models like ChatGPT, GPT-3, GPT-4, they're really trained with next token prediction. So that means that we're going to have sentences like Barack and Michelle Obama went to Harvard to visit their daughter. And the model is going to have, given the sentence, predict what token comes next. In this case, the model is going to use context clues like, oh, we're talking about Barack and Michelle Obama. Barack and Michelle Obama had 2 daughters, and one of those daughters went to Harvard. So if they're going to Harvard to visit their daughter, the next token should probably be Aaliyah, which is in fact the daughter who went to Harvard. Okay, so the way that this works in transformers is you're going to start with some embeddings. So you're going to take every word and you're going to embed every token. You're going to pass these embeddings to a transformer stack, which is going to look at relationships between tokens and also kind of look it up with things that it's known before. And at the end, you're going to take these embeddings and use the very last one to predict the next token. Okay, so let's dive deeper into this transformer stack. So really the part that we'll focus on at this half of the talk, but also keep that NLP in mind, that attention, what it's really doing is kind of do the brute force quadratic comparison. So it's taking every token in that sentence, comparing it to every other token. So what's the relationship between Barack and Obama, between Barack and Harvard, between Barack and daughter? Meanwhile, that NLP is going to run, be computed in parallel against all the tokens. So we won't focus on it as much in this half of the talk, but just keep in mind that NLP can actually be quite wide. So there's quite a few flops there for large models. Well, first we're to say, okay, can we replace that brute force n squared every token to every other token comparison with a sub-quadratic operator? And a promising primitive that would focus on H3 is this thing called the state space model. It's shown here briefly in its recurrent form. So a few key properties of those state space models is that they have this recurrent view. So when you write them out like this, you can do fast generation. So fast, basically O1 generation, and with no fixed context. So this is just a recurrent system. You can take it and run it for locks you like. But state space models, you could also take them and adapt them into a convolutional view, which is actually how we train them. So a convolutional view of the state space model yields fast training in n log at time. So these state space models have shown a lot of promise when we started this, they had shown a lot of promise in a bunch of domains, but not language yet. So they showed promise in kind of medical signal processing, this is graph structure learning. They showed a lot of promise and were kind of BD transformers in all these applications. But they had this critical gap in quality to transformers. So they had almost this 5-point perplexity gap in quality to transformers, which to set some context is the difference between a 100 million parameter model and a 6 billion parameter model. So take transformers, just swap up the attention with these SSMs, and it's like going from a 6 billion parameter model to a 100 million parameter model. So our goal in Hungry Hippos is we want to figure out how can we close this quality gap. So let's dive into how we do this. Really, our work was split into two parts. So first, we wanted to understand why is there this huge gap? Why can this primitive that is so great at time series, at health data, why can it mount to language? And then once we understood that, we figured out, okay, this is how we're going to actually close that gap. So first, the way that we understood that gap is we looked at some synthetic languages. So if you remember that Barack Obama sentence from earlier, a really simple version of that is saying, okay, in order to figure out which data we're talking about, we need to be able to go back and kind of recall tokens from earlier in the sentence. So the simplest possible language that we could come up with was this thing called associative recall, which is a really simple language. The way it works is you have these keys, these letters and these numbers, and these letters and numbers have these associations. And you, for each different sentence, there's a different mapping between the letters and the numbers. So here, A is mapped to 4, B is mapped to 3, C is mapped to 1, D is mapped to 2, etc. So that at the end, you have some letter that you saw earlier in your sentence, and you need to figure out how can you need to go back and look up from this sentence, kind of in context, learn what that right mapping is. So this kind of mimics in context learning capabilities, which are of course some of them the attributes of these language models. But it also mimics this key property of language, which is when you're talking, when you're constructing a sentence, you need to recall information from earlier in the sentence to kind of figure out what you're talking about. So what we did was we took this really simple synthetic task and said, can state-based models solve this? So we set up a really simple task. So vocab size 20, sequence like 40, train out next token prediction, and just put together a really simple 2-layer model. What we found is that the state-based models really fail to solve associative recall. So this is really, a really striking gap. Transformers get perfect accuracy on this task, but the state-based models like S4, even gated state spaces, which was actually designed specifically for language, it just completely fall over on this task. So what we did was we designed a state-based model layer that explicitly, in fact, provably can solve the associative recall problem. So there was some pretty simple ideas. All we did was we took 2 state-based models in each layer instead of 1, and then we added some gating operations. So we also had to do something a little bit different to these 2 state-based models. So this first one, you can think about it almost as a short convolution. And all it has to do is do some local lookup against my sequence. So if I'm at the very end, I just need to be able to look at the previous token. So this is like when I'm trying to predict the last token, I just need to know what token came before. The second state space model with this diagonal SSM really acts as a stored global memory. So between these two kind of specialized layers and these gating multiplicative interactions, this really lets you say, okay, we can actually, so this global memory lets you look up and figure out what are the mappings that came before. These multiplicative interactions allow you to compare, okay, what is this token now? What does it look like compared to something that I've seen before? So we'll walk through in a little bit more detail exactly what these models do. So this first shift state-space model, what it does is what thing it can do that is actually quite hard for other state-space models to do is just remember what the previous token is. So for example, in the sentence Barack and Michelle Obama, and that first in the first token, we're not going to have anything because we didn't have anything before. When we see the second token, we're actually going to output the previous tokens. So we're going to output Barack, it will output Anne, it will output Michelle, etc. Meanwhile, this diagonal state-space model, what it can do is it can remember a token forever. So once you've seen it once, you can keep it for the entire sequence. So here, instead of bringing forward what we just saw, what we're going to do is the first time we see Barack, we're just going to keep going and memorize it for the entire sequence. Now, remember that we're also having these multiplicative interactions, kind of like teal little dots I had shown you. What that allows you to do is you can actually select which tokens you're going to remember. So if, for example, you don't want to remember Barack, you don't want to remember Barack for some reason, all you have to do is multiply by 0, you get a null vector in, and then in those first initial tokens, you're going to just be outputting nothing until you get to some token that you actually want to remember, Michelle, and then you're going to remember it for the rest of the time. Okay, so how can this simple, super simple layer that we constructed, how can it suddenly solve associative recall when we couldn't solve things before? So we'll walk through this super simple example, and we'll walk through it for one head of the model. So I'll pretend that the dimension is very small. In order to show you exactly how we can specialize to kind of recall the token, the associative recall key value pair that comes with the token C. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to have these projection layers, these Q, K, and P, and we're just going to check for a C token. So the Q and K are just going to check, is this current token C? That V projection is just going to check, we're just going to pass through whatever we see. So Q, if you see the A token, so V is going to pass through, but Q and K are going to be 0. If you see the C token, Q and K are say, hey, this is something I want to remember. You're just going to pass it through. See anything else of your forward Q and J, and be like, okay, this is not a C, but this V, we can pass through it. All right, so we have the sequence A4, C2, B3, C. So what exactly is the model going to output at each of these layers? So first we have this A. So the Q and the K are going to send zeros through. That V is just going to pass through. But because you have all these zeros, really you're just going to have zeros with the model, so nothing's going to come out. Same for 4. Really, the magic starts happening when we get to the first C token. So here, the Q and the K are going to light up. And they're going to say, hey, we just saw the C. So there's a couple of things going to happen. So first, notice that 1 that is going into the shift as a sound. So what that's going to do is going to say, it's going to act as a marker that's saying, hey, the last thing that I saw was C. That other one that's going through that first projection, it's also going to go all the way, but it's going to be multiplied by 0, so the model's still not going to output anything. On the next step, we see a 2. So here, the shift token, the shift SSM has remembered that, hey, in the last instance, I saw 1. So now when we send the 2 through, we're going to activate and send that 2 into the diagonal SSM, and then we're going to keep remembering it forever. So now notice that the diagonal SSM is continuing to output the 2. So even though that diagonal SSM continues to output 2, other keys aren't going to trigger it. So this B isn't going to trigger that, so the model is still going to output zeros. If 3 is not going to trigger it, so the model is still outputting 0, even though the diagonal SSM still can still recognize everything. It's only when we get to the end, get to the C value, that now the Q and the K, they activate, that 1 multiplies in and actually lets the K through. So this diagonal SSM that's been saying, hey, 2, 2, 2. It's just been yelling this the whole time. It's not until we kind of see again that we're like, okay, the diagnosis system can now allow it to go through. So in this construction, each kind of H3 block can memorize the values of a single key. Roughly speaking, the number of the H3 blocks grows with. So we take H3 and we train it on associative recall, and now we can see that we can close this gap. And more excitedly, we almost completely close the gap to attention in transformers or in trainable language. And if you, in fact, take hybrid models, so some hybrid H3 layers, attention layers, we can actually start to outperform transformers. So what we were able to do then is we were able to start taking these H3 layers and training up some of these hybrid models. So what we did is we replaced most of the H3 layers and then we kept two of them, one again, just one. Starting to scale these hybrid architectures up. So up to 3 billion parameters, we found that these hybrid H3 bubbles could outperform transformers of the same size and complexity. We found that in initial scaling experiments, they could also outperform transformers and training on the same amount of data. In downstream evaluations like superglue, we found that, again, these hybrid H3 models could achieve better superglue scores on average than transformers. Slides. And of course, the best way to kind of figure out are these models doing something reasonable is check for coherent generation. So this paper was originally presented at iClear, the WANDA this year. So before that conference, I asked H3, hey, I'm giving a talk at iClear, write something nice about Rwanda. And it said these nice things about how Rwanda is a great country, full of culture. So it seems like H3 is a pretty nice. Now, remember at the beginning, I told you that state-space models have overland generation. So what that means is that when you actually replace all these attention layers with H3 layers, you can actually during a good cycle it in this recurrent way. And we could see up to 2.4 times faster generation than transformers. And finally, of course, this recurrent formulation also means they can do infinite generation. So you can start with this H3 model, train it on 2K, just generate text for as long as you like. In our paper, we also looked at some other modalities. So we looked at seizure detection through EEGs, brain fMRI modeling, and found promising performance with H3. So in summary, from this first half of this talk, I told you about H3, the gated SSM layer that can replace almost all the attention layers in the transformer model. With the outshot-based methods hybrid, gated SSM attention models actually outperform transformers, and we scaled up to 3 billion parameters and could scale to much longer sequencing, so it's faster generation. Okay, so that's replacing attention. But at the beginning, I told you that that there's these two aspects to transformers that we want to replace. And in the second half of the talk, I'm going to be telling you about Monarch Mixer and how we got to fully sub-quadratic models in both context length and model dimension in a hardware efficient way. So as a reminder, our goal is really, can we replace both attention and MLPs in this little transformer cartoon? And in the second half of this talk, I'm going to be telling you about how a particular primitive called Monarch matrices, a new family of architectures called Monarch Mixer, could actually allow us to achieve this. So Monarch Mixer is a new sub-quadratic hardware efficient architecture that scales sub-quadratically context length and model dimension. These Monarch matrices are really expressive as well, which allows us to also match quality. In particular, we're able to show that we can match BERT, PIT, GPT quality up to 50% fewer parameters, fewer floats, and faster wall times. Finally, we started to train some of these M2 BERT models for long sequence retrieval, actually start to outperform models that are up to 15 times larger in long sequence retrieval. So this part of the talk will be split into 4 parts. So first, I'll give some background on Monarch matrices, then I'll tell you how we use them to create sub-quadratic architectures. I'll go over some results with Monarch Mixer, and then we'll end with some exciting future directions. So let's start with some background. So background architecture is Monarch Mixer and future directions. So let's start with some background on Monarch matrices. So some high-level motivation. Machine learning models are really all about matrix multiplication. So there's really this core building block that's very important in our ML models. As in one data point and one analysis of transformers, these matrix multiply units accounted for more than 99% of what's lost in transformers. Since these take up, so much computation, the natural question is there anything we can do to make them more efficient? A natural approach is this thing called sparsing. So instead of taking kind of this full dense matrix, we're going to set a bunch of matrices to zero, and we just skip them when we're computing these matrices. Unfortunately, there are many sparsity kind of has two critical challenges. So one, there's this trade-off between efficiency. The more sparse you make your matrix, the fewer flops you have, the faster it can go, but you can't express as many linear transforms. The second challenge is that modern hardware is really, specialized to dense matrix multiply. So on modern accelerators, dense matrix multiply is much faster than general operations. So this got these green and yellow lines are growing much faster than red and blue. So green and yellow is dense matrix multiply. Red and blue is kind of general operations. So this trend is pretty fundamental to how we know how to build hardware. And it's actually accelerating, it's getting more extreme. So in 2018, the VO100 matrix multiply was 8 times faster than general computation. Nowadays, it's 16 times faster on A100 with the H100. So how can you actually get sparsity when you have kind of these two challenges, these two joint challenges? Modern matrices are a way to do this. So modern matrices, their family of block sparse matrices can satisfy both of these constraints. So this is the definition of a modern matrix. So you've got these block diagonal matrices, these blue matrices that are shown here, interleaved with these transpose permutation operations. So why is that important? Why should we care? These block diagonal matrices, so the dark blue means that we have a kind of dense values there. The light blue means that those are all zeros. You can set the sizes of these blocks to grow sub-quadratic. So that means that the entire operation is going to grow, for example, n to the 3/2 instead of n squared. Because these blocks are, these are so blocks of dense matrices at the end of the day, you can still use the tensor core. So they're still hardware efficient. Lastly, these permutations make the entire family of matrices very expressive because they actually generalize the FFT algorithm. We'll dive into each of those pieces. So first, the fact that these are block diagonal sparse means that you can reduce your compute costs. So you've got this structured sparsity where these light blue, those are all zeros. The dark blues are the things that have values. If you set the size of these blocks correctly, you can get sub-quadratic compute. So you can grow it n to the 3/2 or n to the 4/3, for example. But this is not just the sparsity where you just kind of randomly put sparsity where you want. These block diagonal matrices are actually hardware. That's because you can take these block diagonal matrices, just take the dense blocks out. So you go from this big and squared matrix, just take these little dense blocks out. Then these dense blocks, you can compute them using the dense map-all units that are so much faster than alternative approaches. Finally, these transpose permutations give us a lot of expressivity because they mimic the fast Fourier transform algorithm. I'll briefly walk through what this transpose permutation is just to give you some intuition, but then we'll see how it can actually generalize the FFT algorithm. So here we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into the FFT. So what this transpose permutation does is it takes some one-dimensional input, reshapes it to 2D, transposes that matrix, and then writes it back out. So if you're kind of more of a hardware person, you can think about this as reading something real major and writing a column major, doing this transpose permutation. So now we'll see how this actually generalizes the Fourier transform. So briefly recall that a Fourier transform, it's a linear map. So that means that you could just write a matrix sound like this and compute it. But of course, if you do that, you're going to get something that's quadratic compute. But since this thing is so structured, it emits a nice n log n algorithm. So it's got some great scaling properties. This is, one formulation that has classic Fourier transform, fast Fourier transform. Of course, the FFT is very powerful. It has a lot of application, signal processing, control theory, much else. So Monarch matrix really just generalizes the fast Fourier transform algorithm. So to see how, let's walk through the FFT algorithm. Here's one presentation that's known as Bailey's FFT. So Bailey's, what you do is in the first step, you take 1D input and you shape it to 2D, which is just like that first step of our transpose presentation. Then you're going to compute the FFT over the columns of your 2D matrix, adjust with something called twiddle factors, and compute the FFT over the rows. Then finally, you're going to transpose the output as your last step. So let's take a look at how these Monarch matrices actually generalize this compute pattern. So here again, I show a Monarch matrix, and here I show kind of this 2D version of our 1D input for reference. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this transpose permutation and permute it. Then we're going to be applying these block diagonal matrices. So what does that look like? So these block diagonal matrices, each of these blocks is actually just going to run exactly against one of the chunks of this transposed input. So for example, the first one is going to go over 0, 3, 6, and 1, 4, 7, and 2, 5, 8, etc. If you look closely, these dense matrices are exactly operating over the columns of our original input. So this is exactly just like step 2 of our FFT algorithm. And then permute it one more time. And then we're going to run the next block diagonal over this permuted vector unit. So notice here, if you take a look, now we're operating exactly over the rows. So if you think about this as kind of taking steps 3 and 4 of that FFT algorithm and combining them together. So concretely, you're going to take those twiddle factors, just multiply them out into these block diagonal matrices. Finally, you're going to transpose the output one more time. So because Monarch matrices kind of generalize this super powerful primitive comes from signal processing called the FFT, these Monarch matrices are going to be very expressive. So they capture all of these structured linear transforms. I'll briefly call out the convolution is particularly important because, if you remember in the first step of the talk, we use the gated convolutions to replace the tension. So to kind of project forward where it's going to be going with this, we can actually use Monarch matrices to exactly replace the gated convolutions from the first half of the talk. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use Monarch matrices, replace MLP and attention with something that scales sub-quadratically. Okay, so now let's take a look at some of these sub-quadratic architectures. I'll start with the MLP because it's a little bit simpler. What you can do is use an MLP, you can see kind of it red on the left here. You've got these dense matrices with some activation in between. What we're going to do is we're just going to replace these dense matrices with Monarch matrices, or even some with just block diagonal matrices. And then this is kind of going to be, we'll call this kind of a Monarch MLP. So in previous work, if you just take a transformer and do this directly, you can start doing things called like sparsely dense training. So you take a transformer, start training some of these block diagonal matrices for, let's say, 80% of the time. And then at the end, densify train with fully dense models. So the way that we're going to replace attention is we're going to exactly build on the pieces from the first half of the talk. So we're going to take these gated convolutions, gated SSMs, which, from the first half of the talk, we know that they can match transformers. We've seen that even, pure architectures since then have been able to match transformers as well. We're going to take these and use them as our basis to replace attention. Now, key point here is that all of these long convolutions were actually computing them with the FFT. So in particular, there's this thing called the FFT convolution theorem, which says that you can compute a convolution using the FFT, take the FFT of the input, FFT of the kernel, you pointwise multiply, and then you're going to take the inverse of 15. Now, because the Monarch matrices exactly sort of generalize the FFT, the most natural thing to do is we're just going to use them as a drop-in replacement. So instead of using the FFT, we can use these Monarch matrices. So we did this, we trained up some language models. And the first time we did it, we got a little bit of a curious result. So we got these perplexity of 1.0. So if you've ever trained a language model, perplexity is the exponent of the loss. So perplexity 1.0 means zero loss. We've created a perfect language model. So that seems a little bit odd. Have we solved language? Did I give you an AGI halfway to the talk? The answer is no. The model turns out is not causal. The model is cheating. What that means is we're training it on next token prediction, and the model is just cheating, looking up the answer directly. So why is that? Well, it turns out that the model is not causal. So what is causal? So a causal map means that if I have some input U, some output H, H0 can only depend on U0. H1 can only depend on U0, U1. H2 can only depend on U0, U1, and U2. And when we did the super naive initial replacement where we replaced the FFT with Monarch matrices, we broke causality. So in particular, you can just write out Monarch matrices where H2 is going to be exactly equal to U3, and you can imagine how next token prediction stops learning in H. Okay, so a super naive solution is we can just math the output. And this is, in fact, exactly what transformers do. So you're going to take your transform, and in order to compute U0, you just run it again, in order to compute H0, you're just going to run it against infactorable U0 and then a bunch of zeros. Then to compute H1, you're going to run it against U0, U1, etc., all the way to H8. Now, this is a critical drawback. So even if that blue operation, even if we can make that sub-quadratic, this entire operation is still going to be quadratic because you still have to compute it n times. So key technical challenge in our work was how do we efficiently make Monarch convolutions causal? And our approach was instead of saying, hey, we're going to mask out the inputs, we're instead going to make the transform itself causal. The way to do that, I'll just very briefly cover it. If you want more details, you can go look at our paper, is we took a polynomial interpretation of Monarch matrix vector multiply. So let's say you have this Monarch matrix N, this polynomial U of length N. What we're going to do is we're going to interpret U as a polynomial of degree N-1. Then we're going to show that Monarch matrix vector multiplication is just operations with polynomials. We're going to use that polynomial interpretation to derive conditions over the original block diagram matrices that can lead to a causal map. So basically, we translate this, this matrix vector notation into polynomials, do some pretty basic arithmetic over the polynomials, and then invert that, and we get causal Monarch matrices. So we do this, we replace with these causal M primes. We start to get perplexities that make sense. So now we can generalize the FFT this way, get something that is nice and hardware efficient, and that can do nice causal language. So armed with that technical result, let's see the full variety of things we can do and look at some Monarch mixer architectures. So in Monarch mixer architectures, basically what we do is we replace attention with gated Monarch convolutions. We're going to replace the NLPs with these Monarch NLPs. And now we're going to use it and take attack each of these transformer applications where transformers have been dominant. So first we're going to, even though, we did a bunch of math to figure out causal language modeling, we're actually going to start with the non-causal models. Because non-causal models are actually, a lot of workloads these days. So things like BERT that run on everybody's documents. Vision transformers that run for image classification, things like that. And of course, we'll also get to the GPT side. So first we'll start with BERT. So what we did is we took BERT-based, classic BERT, took it with the same number of layers, same models, or same model width, and replaced both tension and NLPs with Monarch mixer. what we found was that we got an architecture out of the box that 27% fewer parameters, 27% fewer flops, and we could actually match BERT-based performance. We saw a similar trend with BERT Lark, where we matched in performance with fewer flops, fewer parameters. What this allowed us to do is that we could actually match BERT quality with fewer flops, fewer parameters, and actually for the first time show full block sparse end-to-end training. Of course, because we've also replaced attention, we also saw faster wall clock times. So here we're just showing some throughput numbers, but basically for transformers, as it gets to longer sequences, things get slower and slower. So for a while, you could actually see this in ChatGPT. If you pasted in a giant essay, ChatGPT would actually get stuck and it would actually take a long time to analyze the whole thing. Even with innovations like flash attention, you still get hit with this quadratic compute, and the throughput of your models is just goes way down as your input gets. With Monarch Mixer, we don't see the same degradation in performance. So we're faster across the board for all these sequence lengths. We see speed up or Hugging Face models up to 9 times how long sequences. So what does these long sequence performance allow us to do? We've started to scale up long sequence retrieval models. So we've trained up M2 BERT based 2K. We actually also trained up 8K for this 2K now, but slightly old. So we're able to train BERT-based models with 8 times longer context length than we have before. Starting to see, so we take these models, train them to do long sequence retrieval, and we see impressive performance. So here it's showing 2-core performance, and we're showing double-digit performance improvements over models that are 15 times larger. So if you have long sequence tasks and you have these long sequence models, you can outperform much larger, much more expensive models just by going to long sequence. In vision transformers, we can start to outperform vision transformers with 49% fewer parameters, 49% fewer flops, which is also exciting. Tackling all those image applications that are top of mind, GPT-4. Speaking of GPT, in the causal models, we actually found something even crazier that started to work that honestly we never really expected, but we started to observe, which is that you could just get rid of the NLPs completely. So you can take all these NLPs, all these parameters. What we did was we took it out, added a bit more in the big state in the attention layer, kept the projections in, and we realized that we could just we could start to match its performance. So here we found that you take this architecture, make it a little bit wider, and that you take the NLP out, and you can start matching transformer performance without attention or NLPs at all. So here the NLP layer is just identity function. That was a pretty wild result. Suggests that really, there's a lot of architectures out there that can match transformers. We don't have to be stuck in this little bit. So that's kind of the main results. Let me briefly tell you about some of the future directions that we're excited about in this work. So first, we're really excited about scaling up sequence like more in the model dimension. Scaling up to larger models, longer sequence models, see what happens when you retrieve over entire books. How does that change the systems that people want to build? We're looking at applications to more architectures. So T5, encoder decoder architectures, diffusion models. Obviously you guys have a bunch of applications out there. If there are applications or architectures you're interested in, please let us know. We love the feedback. Generally speaking, we're very excited about a future where we have fundamentally more efficient models, models that can scale way better than the ones that we have now. Which actually brings me kind of to the summary of our talk as a whole. Today I talked about 2 new architectures that are really tackling these fundamental scaling problems that we see with transformers. And really, if there's one message to take away, that there are much more efficient architectures out there, even though transformers are the thing that people have paid a bunch of money to scale up. That's not the whole story. There's sub-quadratic architectures for everyone. That's kind of a wrap on our talk as a whole. Thank you so much for listening. These two papers were big team efforts. H3 and Mixer, I had a great time working with all these folks on the slide here. Of course, if you'd like to learn more, you can click on these things to find your paper, our code, more blog posts, and look up more and read more. So you can come over at. I'm happy to take questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Dan. It's time for the questions. Anyone? All right. One in the back. Hi. Great to reason. You don't have to answer all my question. I don't know if I could repeat it. First of all, where are the name come from, right? The Haki Hundi Hippo and the Monarch mixer. And a couple two questions. The first one is that are you saying that these S3 architecture will be replacing attention someday? And if that is so, then when do you expect that? And the second one is I kind of understand roughly like this Monarch mixer is a better way to go, but I haven't got a clearly view what actually it is, how does it look like? Thank you.
Sure, yeah. So let me answer all those questions. So the reason it's called Hungry Hippos is that there's a line of work with state-space models where you actually parameterize. I don't know if you can see my mouse. You actually parameterize the components of those state-space models with something called hippo matrices. And it's Hungry Hippos because there's multiple of these state-space models of the layer. So I have just one hippo, it's Hungry Hippo. Monarch mixer is because it generalizes the FFT. The FFT compute pattern is a butterfly, and Monarch is kind of the king of the butterflies. So that's what it's called. Let's see. I think your second question may have been what does Monarch mixer look like? Let me try to find the slide where I show you. Yeah, so it's literally just this here. So it stacks of like kind of this block, the sequence mixer, that stacks up the dimension mixer. So it's literally just kind of this gated evolution architecture versus H3 and the dimension mixer. It looks a lot like an MLP, but instead of the dense linear matrix, we have the plot thing. Then you had another question of when are these models going to replace attention? And actually for several applications, they already are. So for DNA modeling, these models are the way to go. For audio generation, they're the way to go. For time series, they're much better than transformers. Very, very soon, I think this week, you're going to start to see stuff together and some companies release hybrid, some of these hybrid architectures that look a lot like H3 and outperform transformers, and they'll be offered on their platform. So you're starting to see them replace them in all these places, which is really remarkable because we released H3 less than a year ago. And it's really great to see people start to scale them up. But yeah, it's really exciting to do this. Of course, OpenAI, maybe Anthropic, I don't know what they'll do it. What I've heard is that they're not really willing to take risks right now. So, and they have a lot of money, so they go, my trick to them, kind of who they are is that OpenAI is kind of this general flops here. And of course, they wrote the executive order, so they're going to go and see low to cultural regulations.
All right. It's been less than a year and things are developing quite fast. Thank you. A quick follow-up. Just really discuss about the literature review. Is this the only candidate to replace attention, or do you have any other candidate out there?
Yeah, great question. So let me see if we can jump to the slide. And I think, I don't know if these slides will be shared afterwards, but we can take into after. Um, okay, I'm lost about it. Sorry. Here we go. Okay. So if you look at the bottom of the slide, there's a bunch of little papers here. So basically, after each three, where we show that these gated SSMs can really start working, a bunch of people kind of started piling in and also exploring it. So there's this architecture called Hymena, which replaced SSMs with convolutions, which is why I kind of called them gated convolutions later on. There's this architecture called RWKV that you may have heard of, which actually turns out is actually just a gated or a gated convolution. You can actually put them all in the same framework. There's this thing called big switchless paper pre-training out attention, and there's also a gated SSM Cooper. There's this work called S5 that took these, that also looked into this gating. But yeah, so there's been a ton of work in this. There's a lot of people working on it now. A lot of us are really excited about these efficient architectures.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dan. Any other questions? All right. One more from the back.
Hi, we're fitting still. Can I ask about the application on the efficient model? Yes, I'm not convinced that UV is, that outperform this solar right now with non-causal model. And I mean, will be optimized better if you use like SEEL of some kind. Right. Yeah. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing there with diffusion models. So basically, about a year and a half ago, we put out this work called flash attention, and then now it's kind of been used in diffusion models everywhere. But there's still sort of a lot of bottlenecks. So if you ever kind of benchmark and profile a diffusion model, what you'll find is that the first and last attention layers take up a lot of time because they're kind of high resolution. And yeah, so we're looking at replacing those with kind of these sub-quadratic architectures to go faster. The other thing that we're looking is that diffusion models also have a lot of convolutions in them. And we actually have but they're called, they're loose convolutions, or if you come from signal processing, they call them Vivo convolutions. So they're not quite just convolution, they're also convolution mixed with some MLPs. And in our work, we found that kind of splitting those out to do the convolution and then doing the MLP is a lot faster, like up to 7, 8 times faster. So right now we're looking to kind of replacing those convolutions with these kind of depthwise convolutions. If we can do that, we can get models that are gonna, we can make all the layers like 10 times faster. You're starting to see, with things like latent consistency models, that they only need 2 or 3 steps instead of 50. With that, I think you could start to see diffusion models that go at like video frame rates, like 24 images per second, with some systems optimizations and new algorithms. So that when I say at 2 diffusion, that's kind of what I mean, where we're gonna like take the architectures, change them a little bit to make them 2 diffusions faster, and then plug them into the best, consistency model.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your insights and the updates on the forefront trends on how things are being developed right now. So please give a big round of applause to Dan. Right. Thank you so much, Dan.
Right.
All right. Okay. And coming up next, before we continue with our day, let's have some wake out activities a bit. So we can stretch out